Hey, welcome everyone. I appreciate you guys tuning in for our Wednesday Why. I apologize that we actually missed it last night. We had a bit of a family emergency, but we've gotten that taken care of and we're back. And we're going to continue with our series on Psalm 119. And we're going to talk about some things that maybe you didn't know. I know I didn't know this until I started studying this a little bit. And we're going to jump right in with our culture quiz. So here's a couple of questions for you to consider. When you read something in the Bible that you don't understand, do you stop and look up the answers? Or do you just keep reading? Okay. How about when you hear a sermon or a teaching of some sort and someone says something you don't quite understand, or maybe you aren't sure if that's the truth? Do you look up the answers, or do you just kind of put it on the back burner and let it go? Do you look up definitions of words and terms used in the Bible so that you can better understand them? Okay, these are all Bible study basics that every believer should be participating in here. Okay, and that's all right. That's okay if you're not yet, but this is maybe some goals for you. Have you ever been told that the law has been fulfilled or that the law has been done away with? Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. Also, do you know what the definition of the law is in the Bible? When we read that term, someone says the law has been done away with or the law has been fulfilled. Do we even know what that term means, what the definition for that term is? Okay. And then finally, do you know the differences between the law and the ordinances of God? Okay. So just a few introductory culture questions for you to see kind of where you're at. And if you answered no to any of those questions, which I'm sure all of us did at some point or on some level, then tonight, I think you're going to maybe find some of this helpful. So we're going to start with Deuteronomy 6. Deuteronomy 6:4 is considered one of the key passages in the entire Bible. The beginning of Deuteronomy 6, really verses 1 through 6, 1 through 8 are considering one of the key passages in the Bible. It's called the Shema, saying we need to hear and listen and obey. But look at how it starts in Deuteronomy 6 and verse 1. It says this: "Now this is the commandment, the statutes, and the judgments, which the Lord your God has commanded me to teach you, so that you may do them in the land that you are going over to take possession of it, so that you, your son, and your grandson will fear the Lord your God, to keep his statutes and his commandments, which I command you all the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged." Okay, that is the New American Standard Version. If we go to the American Standard Version, it says, "Now this is the commandment, the statutes, and the ordinances which Jehovah your God commanded to teach you." So these are the commandments, these are the statutes, these are the ordinances of God. Now, why did we pick that up? Because we're going to look at in Psalm 119, how does David pick up on this concept? And we're going to find something out about Psalm 119 that maybe you weren't aware of, or maybe you weren't fully aware of, okay? Look, we're going to fast forward to verse 9 in Psalm 119, the bet section. And it says this: how can a young man keep his way pure? By keeping it according to your word. With all my heart I have sought you. Do not let me wander from your commandments. I have treasured your word in my heart, so that I may not sin against you. Blessed are you, Lord. Teach me your statutes. With my lips I have told of all the ordinances of your mouth. I have rejoiced in the way of your testimonies, as much as in all riches. I will meditate on your precepts and regard your ways. I shall delight in your statutes. I will not forget your word. Deal generously with your servant, that I may live and keep your word. Open my eyes, that I may behold wonderful things from your law. I am a stranger on the earth. Do not hide your commandments from me. My soul is crushed with longing for your ordinances at all times. Rebuke the arrogant. You rebuke the arrogant, the cursed, who wander from your commandments. Take disgrace and contempt away from me, for I comply with your testimonies. Even though rulers sit and speak against me, your servant meditates on your statutes. Your testimonies are also my delight. They are my advisors. Okay, so Psalm 119 begins something here that is picked up from Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy chapter 6. This theme continues through this entire psalm. Remember, this is the centerpiece of the Psalms of David. This is by far his epic, his masterpiece, his symphony. Okay, this is it. And what does he say over and over? I need your testimonies, your statutes, your commandments, your ordinances, your law, your word, your ways, your precepts, your whatever. Over and over and over, he's talking about these things. And what you find is, through the entirety of Psalm 119, you won't make it through 2 verses before he mentions this again. So it must be a central focus of something we need to take hold of here, okay? And look at these 4 things that David prays in this particular passage. He says this: I want to keep my way pure. He wants to keep his way pure. He wants to not wander from the Lord, and he wants to not sin against him, and he wants his eyes to be open to the things of God. Okay? Now, hopefully all of us have that same prayer in our hearts, right? That we want to be pure, that we don't want to wander from his ways, that we don't want to sin against him, and that we want our eyes to be open to the truth, right? So the question is, how is this accomplished, right? Well, David gives us that understanding if we will define some of these terms, okay? He says it's by the commandments, by the precepts, by the law, by the testimonies, by the ordinances, by all of these different things. So let's look at these words and see what they mean, because, we read it earlier, or asked the question earlier. Have you ever been told that the law has been done away with? Well, I think we all have, right? The law has been fulfilled or whatever. Well, that's just one word that's used here. What about the commandments? What about the ordinances? What about the statutes? What do these words even mean? How are they any different? Or is it all just the law, right? Well, let's look at that, okay? So first word that we get from these passages is the word commandments. And it's the Hebrew word mitzvah, okay? I'll give you the Strong's information there for it if you want to go look it up, the root word as well. But this is what it means. It means to lay a charge upon, to command, to charge, to give orders, or to appoint something or someone, right? That is a command, okay? verse 10 mentions this word, what we just read. Do not let me wander from your commandments. This is how he keeps his way pure. This is how he makes sure he doesn't sin against God. This is how he fulfills those prayers that he has, right? Do not let me wander from your commandments. Okay. Now, this is something really important because we come from a Western society of democracy, of a Congress, of a president, of voting on everything the way we do. We do not understand this particular word because this is a command, right? This is to lay a charge upon. Now, in the Near East culture, in the ancient culture of this time, when a king gives a command, the only way for that command to be changed is for the king to die or for the king to change that command. So there has to be something specifically said against that command where the king changes his mind. For instance, if you remember King Nebuchadnezzar, when he puts out this thing about nobody can pray to any god except for me for however long, and Daniel does not obey. He goes into his room, he prays, he gets pulled away. He cannot defy his decree, even though he likes Daniel. And so he has to throw Daniel in the lion's den as the punishment because that's what his command said was going to happen. Now, when the king saw what the God of Daniel did, okay, then he looked at Daniel and he said, I'm changing my command. From now on, the only one that will be worshipped is the God of Daniel, right? And so this is the way this works, right? This is kind of the idea behind it, is the king is the only one that can change a command. We cannot change the command. The command cannot go away without the expressed spoken command being changed by the king. All right. Now let's look at another word, judgment. Okay. So sorry, going back for 1 second. When we see the word command, think of that. That's what it means. Okay. So David is saying, I'm not going to wander from what you have commanded, right? What about the word judgment? Well, judgment is the word mishpat, which is the process of deciding something. It's a decision in the law. It's justice. It's ordinance. It's the legal right or privilege due. Okay. In verse 7 of Psalm 119, it says, I will praise thee with uprightness of heart when I shall have learned thy righteous judgments. Okay. We're going to come back to that in a second. What about the word statute? Okay. This word means a condition of or civil enactment from God, enactment or decree, a limit, something prescribed or something required. Okay. Verse 20 in this passage says, my soul is crushed with longing for your ordinances and your statutes at all times. Okay. Why did I put those two together? Because if you look at the word ordinances, it is the same word. So the word statute and the word ordinance are the only two words when we're talking about this that are kind of interchangeable here. All right. So that's important for us to understand, because when it uses statute or when it uses ordinance, those two words are the same. What about the word testimonies? Well, testimonies is a witness. Okay. But specifically, it's referring to the laws as divine testimonies. Okay. So it's us testifying or a testimony of the divine law of God. Okay. Verse 24 says, your testimonies also are my delight. They are my advisors. All right. And then finally, the word law is the Hebrew word Torah or Torah. Okay. It's a special law or a code of laws. It's directions, instructions, prophetic teaching, legal directives, and customs. Okay. David prayed, open my eyes that I may behold wonderful things from your law, which makes us think, right, that if we are not looking at the law, looking at the instructions of God and seeing wonderful things, maybe our eyes are blinded by this world or the God of this world, like Paul talks about, and we cannot see clearly, because David says, Open my eyes. When my eyes are open, I will see wonderful things from your law. Okay, so let's summarize these words here. Okay, so first of all, you have commandment. A commandment is an order or a charge given by a king to us to keep or observe. So you have the 10 commandments, you have the feast days, you have the Sabbath, so on and so on and so forth. All right. What about judgments? Judgments tell us how to handle situations that arise between God's people. Okay. So he gives us instructions about how to handle theft. He gives us instructions about how to handle people who come into how to handle a dispute between people when it comes to land, how to handle if you loan money to someone, how to handle all these different situations. He tells us judgments are telling us how we are supposed to treat one another and how to handle situations that arise between the people. Okay. What about statutes and ordinances? Okay. These are requirements or decrees that are describing how to live in obedience to him. Okay. This is also, David uses a word that other people don't, that's translated a lot of times precepts. Okay. It also has this type of feeling. It is what the people of God are supposed to do in obeying their God. Okay. And then finally, the word law, contextually should be understood as being inclusive of the commandments, the judgments, the statutes, all of those things that are given to us by the Creator. Okay. So we need to understand that the law is the overarching picture of all of these smaller pieces that he has instructed of us or instructed us to do, the things he has required of us, the judgments he has given us as far as how we are to treat one another. For instance, a judgment would be this: if my brother comes to me and is in need and I loan that brother money, there are specific judgments as to how I am supposed to treat that person. If that person is a brother, I am not supposed to charge that person interest. Okay. That would be a judgment. Okay. Again, when these things have taken place, unless that king comes back and changes his decrees, changes his commandments, changes his judgments and his laws, these things are to be upheld forever. Okay. So that gives us a little bit of understanding as you read through Psalm 119, as you read through the Old Testament and you see these words pop up, they do mean different things. Okay. And we can see very clearly that these things have not passed away. This is the kingdom of God. He is describing his kingdom. A king gives judgments, a king gives commands, a king gives statutes and ordinances in order to tell us how his kingdom will be ruled. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He has not changed these things. Now, do they look a little different here on earth than they will when heaven comes? Absolutely, because we are still in this fallen world. We are living among Babylon, among Egypt, and we don't have a righteous king installed ruling from Zion. We do not have that at this point, right? So these things will be enacted at some point, but at the moment, we are doing the best we can to follow these with the grace of God, obviously, because we can't do these things in our own strength. But we should never look at these and say, oh, we can throw all this out now because it's not important. I'd like to see some proof of that, because I don't think you can prove that scripturally. Okay. Now, there is one other word that we get in these passages that we should probably consider. Okay. And I was reading this recently, and this word kind of stuck out to me. It's a pretty common word, but if we look at it, there's some background to it that we should explore, because David used this a lot in the passage we just read, but he uses it a ton in Psalm 119, and we should understand it. And it is the word. He says in verse 17, deal generously with your servant that I may live and keep your word. That Hebrew word is dabar. Okay. It means to speak, to declare, to converse, to command, to promise, and to warn. Okay? But if we look back at the Septuagint that was written in Greek, and we go back to that word, then it leads us to another passage, and it familiarizes us with another passage that may give us a little bit, again, some insight into why David is such a dear character to the heart of God. Okay, let's look at John chapter 1, and beginning in verse 1, it says, "In the beginning was the Word." That's the same word we just read. It's the same word used in Psalm 119, verse 17. It's the same word used in Exodus 20, when he says, "And this is the word that God spoke to them," when he begins to give them the commandments, right? It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And then it gives us this important article. He, okay, it's not just talking about the act of speaking. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, not even one thing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and that life was the light of mankind, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not grasp it. Notice that it's talking about that word that was given to David, that word that was given to Moses, and it's speaking about him, not just about something that was spoken. Why? Because if you really understand the character of God, if you understand the person of Jesus, the person of Yeshua that John is speaking about here in chapter 1, the term logos is the Greek word, okay, is the same word for debar. Okay, they use logos in the Septuagint for the debar, and this is talking about the word of God, Yeshua, coming into these situations and speaking who he was, what he was all about, and what the Father was all about. Why are we saying this? Because he's telling us in this passage his judgments, his ordinances, his statutes, his law. That is who Yeshua is. How come Yeshua came and fulfilled it all? It's not talking about the fact that it's done away with. It's talking about the fact that he perfectly lived the judgments. He perfectly lived the precepts, the ordinances, the statutes, the commandments. He perfectly lived it all. Why? As an example for you and me. Not so that we don't have to do it. Okay? Obviously, again, we can't do it in our own strength, but it's so that we can see the example of the way we are supposed to pursue these things, right? Maybe there's a key for us here as to why David was considered a man after the heart of God. Why? Because of what we just talked about. He understood the person of Yeshua was in these commands. The person of Yeshua was in these judgments. The person of Yeshua was in these statutes and ordinances. And only by the person of Yeshua could we keep our way pure. Could we not wander from the ways of God? Could we not sin against him? And could our eyes be open to the truth? He understood this. David, I think, all the way back there understood this. And John is picking up on what David understood, on what Moses experienced. They heard the word speaking to them, okay? Not just a word spoken to them. They heard the word speaking to them. And we see it again in verse 14 of John, that the word became flesh. Okay, so it's an embodiment. It's the incarnation of these things, the incarnation of the commandments of God, the incarnation of the judgments, the ordinances, the statutes of God became flesh and dwelt among us. And we saw his glory. Whose glory? His glory, the Father and the Son. The glory of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Full of grace and truth. That is so important for us to hear, because most of the time, all we read is full of grace, and everything we preach is grace, and everything we understand is grace. But what is the truth? It is this: the commandments, the words, the testimonies, the precepts, the statutes, the ordinances, the law, the Torah, the judgments, and the ways of God. This is the truth. So we are not supposed to just walk by grace. And David understood this. He understood the grace of God. He said, Father, forgive me, right? He understood, create in me a clean heart, renew in me a steadfast spirit. I understand that I'm not okay, right? I need the grace of God. I need the forgiveness of God. But he also understood, Lord, let me not wander from your commandments, from your statutes and ordinance, from your ways, your law, your word. Keep it close to me so that I can be with you and like you. This is the Psalm 119 matrix. There's so much going on in here, guys, that that we're just getting pieces of. I understand, but I hope that made sense to you, and I hope that somehow it spoke to you a little bit. But man, this is just such an awesome passage, and I hope you guys will read it, take it to heart, and really try to see what the Father has put together for us here in David's masterpiece of a psalm. All right, amen. Well, before we go, I want to let you know, we're thankful for your support. Again, liking this video, sharing this video, talking about this video. If it's blessing you, you can also scan or click on the link to give, or in the description box below on YouTube or on Facebook. You can see our merchandise. If you want to buy some merchandise, this is a hat we have some t-shirts and some different things. And all that is going towards us being able to continue to grow our ministry here and do the things that we feel like the Lord has called us to do. So God bless you guys. Thank you again so much for tuning in, and we wish you the best. God bless you, and shalom. Have a great rest of your week.